Hey, people are popping in. I'm trying earbuds this time, so let me know if you can hear me. I'm not sure if the earbuds are working. I believe they are, so hopefully you can hear me. Did you hear that? Water. Gotta stay hydrated for the pipes. Okay, that should work there. All right, so the last thing we remember was that Despereaux has woken up from a nap. He was having a dream. Roscuro has already started his plan, and him and Meg and P are already on their way to the dungeon. They might already be in the dungeon. And um, now it's up to Despereaux, see how he's going to fix this. Okay. So we're at chapter 40, forgiveness. He went first to the throne room, but the king was not there. And so Despereaux slipped through a hole in the molding and was making his way to the princess's room when he came upon the mouse council, 13 mice and one most very honored head mouse, sitting around their piece of wood, debating important mouse matters. Um, this is the council that sent him to the dungeon, got his tail chopped off. It's because of them. Despereaux stopped and stood very still. Fellow honored mice, said the most very honored head mouse, and he looked up from the makeshift table and saw Despereaux. Despereaux, said the most very, he whispered. The other mice of the council leaned forward, straining to make some sense of the word that the head mouse had just uttered. Pardon, one said. Excuse me, said another. I didn't hear that right, said a third. I thought you said Despereaux? The head mouse gathered himself. He tried speaking again. Fellow members, he said, a ghost, a ghost. And he raised a shaking paw and pointed it at Despereaux. The other mice turned and looked. And there was Despereaux, Despereaux Tilling, covered in flour, looking back at them. The telltale red thread around his neck like a thin trail of blood. Despereaux, said Lester, son, you've come back. Despereaux looked at his father and saw an old mouse whose fur was shot through with gray. How could that be? Despereaux had only been gone a few days, but his father seemed to have aged many years in his absence. Hmm, interesting. Son, I mean, my ghost of a son. I dream about you every night. I dream about beating the drum that sent you to your death. I was wrong. What I did was wrong. No, called the very most honored mouse. No, I've destroyed it, said Lester. I've destroyed the drum. Will you forgive me? He clasped his front paws together and looked at his son. No, shouted the head mouse again. No, do not ask the ghost to forgive you, Lester. You did as you should. You did what was best for the mouse community. Lester ignored the head mouse. Son, he said, please. Despereaux looked at his father, at his gray streaked fur and trembling whiskers and his front paws clasped together in front of his heart, and he suddenly felt as if his own heart would break in two. His father looked so small, so sad. Forgive me, Lester said again. Forgiveness, reader, is, I think, something very important. It's much like hope and love. It's a powerful and it's a wonderful thing. Isn't it ridiculous, after all, that it's also kind of ridiculous? I mean, you think that a son could forgive his father for beating the drum that sent him to his death. Isn't it ridiculous to think that a mouse could ever forgive anybody for such perfidy? Hmm? You know what that means. But still, here are the words Despereaux Tilling spoke to his father, and he said this: I forgive you, Paul. I forgive you. And he said those words because he sensed that it was the only way to save his own heart, to stop it from breaking in two. The Despereaux reader spoke those words to save himself. And then he turned from his father and spoke to the whole Mouse Council. You were wrong, he said. All of you. You asked me to renounce my sins. I ask you to renounce yours. You wronged me. You should repent. Never, said the head mouse. Despereaux stood before the Mouse Council, and he realized that he was a different mouse than he had been the last time he had faced them. He had been to the dungeon and back out of it. He knew things that they would never know. What they thought of him, he realized it didn't matter at all. And so, without saying another word, Despereaux turned, left the room. After he was gone, the head mouse slapped his trembling paw on the table. Mice of the council, he said, we have been paid a visit by a ghost who has told us to repent. We will now take a vote. All in favor of saying that this did not occur, vote aye. And from the members of the Mouse Council, there came a tiny but emphatic chorus of ayes. Not these eyes, but like, yes, I. Like, aye, Captain. Only one mouse said nothing. You know who that is. It was Lester, Despereaux's father. Lester Tilling had turned his head away from the other members of the Mouse Council. He was trying to hide his tears. He was crying, reader, because he had been forgiven. Chapter 41, The Tears of a King. Despereaux found the king in the peas room, sitting on his daughter's bed, clutching the tapestry of her life to his chest. He was weeping, although weeping really is too small of a word for the activity that the king had undertaken. Tears were cascading from his eyes. A small puddle had formed at his feet. I'm not exaggerating. The king, it seemed, was intent on literally crying himself a river. Reader, have you ever seen a king cry? When the powerful are made weak, when they are revealed to be human, to have hearts, their diminishment is nothing short of terrifying. Have I ever cried in front of you guys? Not clear. You can be sure that Despereaux was terrified, absolutely, but he spoke up anyway. Sir, said the mouse to the king. But the king did not hear him, and as Despereaux watched, King Philip dropped the tapestry and looked at his great golden crown from atop his head and used it to beat himself over the chest over and over again. The king, I have already mentioned, had several faults. He was nearsighted. He made ridiculous, unreasonable, and difficult to enforce laws, and much in the way of Miggery Sow, he was not exactly the sharpest knife in the drawer. But there was one extraordinary, wonderful, admirable thing about the king. He was a man who was able and willing to love with the whole of his heart. And just as he loved the queen with the whole of his heart, so too he loved his daughter, P, with the whole of it. Even more than the whole, he loved the Princess P with every particle of his being, and she had been taken from him. But what Despereaux had come to say to the king had to be said again, so he tried again. Excuse me, he said. He wasn't certain really how a mouse should address a king. Sir did not seem like a big enough word, so Despereaux thought about it for a long moment. He cleared his throat and he spoke loudly, or as loudly as he was capable of speaking. Excuse me, most very honored head person. King Philip stopped beating his crown against his chest, and he looked around the room. Was that? Down here, most very honored head person, said Despereaux. The king, tears still falling from his eyes, looked at the floor and squinted, because he was what? Nearsighted. Is that a bug speaking to me? He asked. No, said Despereaux. I am a mouse. We met before. A mouse? Bellowed the king. A mouse is but one step removed from a rat. Sir, said Despereaux, most very honored head person, please, you have to listen to me. This is important. I know where your daughter is. You do? Said the king. He sniffed. He blew his nose on his royal cloak. Sorry. Where? He said, and as he bent over to look more closely at Despereaux, one tear, two tears, three enormous, giant, king-sized tears fell with an audible plop onto Despereaux's head and rolled down his back, washing away the white flour and revealing his brown fur. Sir, most very honored head person, sir, said Despereaux as he wiped the king's tears out of his own eyes. It's kind of gross. She's in the dungeon. Liar, said the king. He sat back up. I knew it. All rodents are liars and thieves. She is not in the dungeon. My men have searched the dungeon. But no one really knows the dungeon except the rats. Sir, there are thousands of places where she could be hidden, and and only the rats would know. Your men would never be able to find her if the rats did not want her to be found. The king said, and he clapped his hand over his ears. Do not speak to me of rats and what they know, he shouted. Rats are illegal. Rats are against the law, and no rats in my kingdom are allowed to exist. Sir, most very honored head person, that is not true. Hundreds of rats live in the dungeon inside this castle. One of them has taken your daughter, and if you will send. The king started humming. I can't hear you. He stopped to shout. I cannot hear you. And anyway, what you say is wrong because you are a rodent, therefore a liar. He started to hum again, and he stopped and said, I have hired fortune tellers and a magician. They are coming from a distant land, and they will tell me where my beautiful daughter is. They will speak the truth. A mouse cannot speak the truth. I am telling you the truth, Despereaux said. I promise. But the king would not listen. He sat with his hands over his ears. He hummed loudly. Big, fat tears rolled down his face and fell to the floor. And Despereaux sat and stared at him in dismay. What should he do now? He put a nervous paw up to his neck and pulled the red thread, and suddenly his dream came flooding back to him. The dark and the light and the knight swinging his sword, and the terrible moment when he had realized that the suit of armor was empty. And then, reader, as he stood before the king, a wonderful, amazing thought occurred to the mouse. What if the suit of armor had been empty for a reason? What if it had been empty because it was waiting for him? You know me. That was the knight in his dream. What the knight had said. Yes, said Despereaux out loud in wonder. I do know you. I can't hear you, sang the king. I'll have to do it myself, said the mouse. I will be the knight in shining armor. There is no other way. It has to be me. Despereaux turned. He left weeping. He left the weeping king, and he went to find the Threadmaster. Hmm. Why would he be looking for Threadmaster? Hmm. How's Thread going to help Despereaux rescue P? Chapter 42, The Rest of the Thread. The Threadmaster was sitting atop a spool of thread, swinging his tail back and forth and eating a piece of celery. Well, look here, he said when he saw Despereaux. Oh, would you just look at that? It's the mouse who loved a human princess back from the dungeon in one piece. The old Threadmaster would say that I didn't do my job well, that because you were still alive, I must have tied the thread incorrectly. But it is not so. And how do I know it is not so? Because the thread is still around your neck. He nodded and took a bite of his celery. I need the rest of it, said Despereaux. The rest of what? Your neck? The rest of the thread. Well, I can't just hand over my thread to any old mouse, said the Threadmaster. They say the red thread is special, sacred, although I myself, after having spent so much time with it, I know what it is. What is it? Said Despereaux. It's thread, said the Threadmaster. He shrugged and took another loud bite of celery. Nothing more, nothing less. But I pretend, friend, I pretend. And what, may I ask you, do you intend to do with the thread? Save the princess. Ah, yes, the princess, the beautiful princess. That's how this whole story started, isn't it? It seems to be that way with most things. Oh, I have to save her. There is no one but me to do it. It seems that way with most things. No one to do the really disagreeable jobs except oneself. How exactly will you use a spool of thread to save the princess? A rat has taken her and hidden her in the dungeon, so I have to go back to the dungeon, and it is full of twists and turns and hidden chambers. Like a maze, said the Threadmaster. Yes, like a maze, and I have to find my way to her wherever she is hidden, and then I have to lead her back out again. And the only way to do that is with the thread. Gregory the jailer tied a rope around his ankle so that he would not get lost. As the mouse said this, he shuddered, thinking of Gregory and his broken rope, dying, lost in the darkness. I, said Despereaux, I will use thread. The Threadmaster nodded. Hmm. I see. I see, he said, and took a meditative bite of celery. You're a friend. Oh, you, friend, are on a quest. I don't know what that is, said Despereaux. You don't have to know. You will just have to feel compelled to do the thing, the impossible, the important task at hand. Impossible, said Despereaux. Impossible, said the Threadmaster. Important, he sat, chewing his celery and staring somewhere past Despereaux, and then suddenly leapt off his stool. And who am I to stand in the way of a quest? He said. Roll her away. I can have it? Yes, for your quest. Despereaux put his front paws up and touched the spool. He gave it an experimental push forward. Thank you, he said, looking into the eye of the Threadmaster. I don't know your name. Hovis. Thank you, Hovis. There's something else. Something that belongs to the thread. Hovis went into the corner and came back with a needle. Ooh, what's he going to do with that? You can use it for protection. Like a sword, said Despereaux. Like a knight would have? Yes, said Hovis. He gnawed off the length of thread and used it to tie it to the needle around Despereaux's waist. Like so. Thank you, Hovis, said Despereaux. He put his right shoulder against the spool of thread and pushed it forward again. Wait, said Hovis. He stood up on his hind legs and put his paw on Despereaux's shoulders and leaned in close to him. Despereaux smelled the sharp, clean scent of celery as the threadmaster bent his head, took hold of the thread around Despereaux's neck and his sharp teeth, and pulled it hard. There, said Hovis, and the piece of thread broke and dropped to the ground. And now you're free. See, you are not going into the dungeon because you you are not going into the dungeon because you have to. You're going to the dungeon because you choose to. Yes, said Despereaux, because I am on a quest. And the world felt good and right in his mouth. That word, I'm sorry, the word felt good. Quest. Quest. Hmm. Say it, reader. Say the word with me out loud. Say it. Quest. Hmm. Say it. Come on, say it. Just say it out loud. Quest. Hmm? I heard you say it. Isn't it an extraordinary word? Isn't it so small and yet so full of wonder, so full of hope? Quest. Goodbye, said Hovis as Despereaux pushed the spool of thread out of the threadmaster's hole. I have never known a mouse who has made it out of the dungeon only to go back into the dungeon again. Goodbye, friend. Goodbye, mouse among mice. And that brings us to chapter 43, What Cook Was Stirring. We're going to stop there. It's typing quest, yeah. It's like saying it, but say it, quest. Quest. Yeah, good job. All right, guys. We'll do it again tomorrow. We'll be on chapter 43. I think things are about to get hectic. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourself. Take care of your families. Double peace.